yesterday, there was a continuation from last Monday with Ron introducing some of the verses found in the third chapter of John in relationship to what it means to be born again, and how it relates to our life or this current period of time in our lives. And I want to see, I'm sure he does as well, if there are any questions in relationship to what has been discussed or what you have, what questions have arisen as a result of your having read these verses, or for that matter, anything that you may have come in contact with through verbal experience or something that you read. Any questions whatsoever about anything at this moment? If there aren't any questions, and there doesn't seem to be any at this moment, Ron, I'm going to ask if you would pick up where you left off or do a recap or however you are led to continue this discussion.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. On yesterday, even more so than Monday, I was left with feeling that, not that we didn't do a good job, I think we had an excellent discussion, but there were more questions still than answers, still not seeing this totally. And as Barbara alluded to, and myself and Pastor and others that I talked to, we still don't quite see or have the complete answer yet for verse 8 that talks about the wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but do not know where it comes from or where it is going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. What exactly does that mean? We I think have an understanding of Nicodemus's role in this and that of religion, and his succumbing or coming to Jesus with being in a confused state, being a religious leader, and why that was important for him to come to Jesus in a submissive way, and which allowed Jesus to infuse the earth with spiritual concepts and principles of truth rather than religious jargon that has no bearing on anything or to help you in any aspects of life itself. So I think we have a firm grasp on how this got started, and looking at how this also we seem to look at Jesus. We've attached a label or a title to Jesus as being God-like, and not seeing that in this instance, this sort of unleashed something or enabled him to bring further enlightenment into the earth that he did not have prior to this. And we look at that as we explained that on last week. On yesterday, Jesus is also going through a transition as this is taking place. And hopefully we'll get into a little bit of that later. But back to verse 8, a couple of things that stood out to me here is I mentioned to Pastor earlier, verse 7 and 10. Verse 7 said, "Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again." And verse 10 said, and Jesus answered and said to him, "Are you the teacher of Israel and do not understand these things?" So those two verses stood out to me because I look at this and I say, why does Jesus expect Nicodemus to know this? I look back at in the limited time at some of the prophets, and I don't see where anybody was talking about being born again or going back to beginning. So this is a spiritual concept that being in the position he was in, he was expected to know. And even with my saying that, it does not mean that he did not have opportunity to go back and get this. But this had to be something that was internally motivated in him, is what I'm getting at. Because from a religious perspective, how God was seen to man as being something external as opposed to being internal was not being taught. God was something that was heavenly and something that was not a part of who man was until man turned to the priests and followed the precepts of Judaism and the religion of whatever other choices that they had. So that caught my attention too, and that's kind of also the catalyst for where we're going today. Because when you look at that and look at verse 8, you have to ask yourself, what took place in the beginning that you're supposed to turn back to? What does beginning look like? And what is it that we're supposed to see? So that's kind of where I am today, and I am strongly encouraging dialogue, and because this is a lot in looking at this. I looked at this. Questions or comments so far from anyone?
Yes, Ron.
Yes, sir.
When you spoke of the prophets not having taught that, it clicked. The prophets didn't teach. The prophets they admonished, they guided, they gave answers.
Okay.
And the prophets lived pretty much at the beginning without actually talking about it. It is my belief that what happened is the priests were supposed to be the ones to teach the people, and they didn't do that. The prophets were the voice of the universe, or the voice of a boom that would keep the people or keep the priests on the right pathway. And when that did not happen, then that was raised up out of the womb of Mary, a man called Jesus, or out of the womb of Miriam, a man called Yeshua. And because of the birth, this man was brought into the earth to expound on the truth that our Creator intended for us to embrace. And he did not, in teaching those things, he did not have answers if there were not questions. Because when I think about it, when we look at some of the most profound things that were spoken from his lips, they were in response to questions, be they from the priests or from the disciples, be they questions to antagonize or questions for in search of information or understanding. They were still questions. For example, when he was challenged about presenting himself as God, he said, "It's not written that I say that you're gods." It was those kinds of instances that brought out the depth of the truth, or the depth of enlightenment that was supposed to be given to humanity. And that was missing. That was the missing ingredient, or that is the missing ingredient in religion. I'm done.
Okay. Thank you, Pastor. Anyone else? And a very good observation. The prophets did not teach this, but the prophets indeed taught from their hearts. Or a better way of saying it, they spoke internally. What they felt, what they saw internally. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Any other questions or comments, please? I looked at this, and what I'm going to need your help with is I'm seeing it from my perspective, but I want to hear from you guys as well. I want to know what it is that we're supposed to see when we return to beginning, and how do you use it? So I looked at this from the perspective of Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Okay? That's Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2. I also looked at it from the perspective of the Gospel of John, chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being by Him, and apart from Him, nothing came into being that has come into being. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Now, I'm reading from New American Standard, just in case someone was wondering. But what does that mean? From looking at it from the perspective of John first, and then we'll go back. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. That word life is talking about life force, everything that exists, that primal energy that contains everything in the universe. Okay, so that was the light of men, and that was another word that is used for it. When I kind of looked that up, it talked about the depth, or the different layers, or the different faces, or the different aspects of the soul. It's yes, sir.
Before you get into that portion of it, I think a couple of lessons ago I made a statement, and no one questioned it, that the body, according to the Aramaic and Hebrew, is a corpse. Remember that?
Yes.
If the body is a corpse is something with no life. So, if it has no life, then the thing that gives it life is the thing that connects the physical world to the invisible world, or the spiritual to the natural world. And the only thing that bridges the gap between this material world and the spiritual world is breath, which is also spirit. So, if that is true, then without the existence, not without the existence, when we look at the light of life, then are we not referencing the breath itself, which is energy? we want to understand what we are to see or experience in the beginning, in our return to beginning, rather, then we have to, at some point, make an effort to dispense with the belief that we are any parts of this body. The body may become a part of us, but we are not a part of it. If we could dispense with the physicality of our eyes, then what do we see if there is no body? What do we see, not with our eyes, but with our eye? What do we see? If you look into the universe, if you just look, open your eyes and look and remove all the objects away, you don't, the trees, everything, you don't see anything, yet you can feel the wind. You experience the light, but do you really see it? So when we go back to beginning, is it what we see or is it what we experience? And that experience, is it an experience that we have a relationship to the physical form, which is body, or is it an experience that we have which with the invisible spirit or the invisible essence of who we are? Where does that experience take place? Even when you read that passage, right? What did we see? Did we see a cloud of darkness covering the deep? What did your mind experience? Not your soul, but your mind. What did it experience when that passage was read? I think these questions being answered or mulled over will give us some sense of the experience to be expected when we return to beginning. And keep in mind also that when Jesus said to Nicodemus, you must return to beginning, it means that Nicodemus at some point in his existence had been at beginning before. Otherwise, he could not return to it. And I hope I'm making sense. Any questions about that? Comments?
This is Barbara. Good morning. When Ron read that, to respond, give one response to the question you just asked, what did my mind see? My mind, from a materialistic point of view, when you talked about darkness was on the face of the deep, blah, 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 I saw separate kinds of things. I saw darkness, I saw deep, I saw Spirit of the Lord, all of them being separate things. But from a spiritual perspective, before they separated, all were one. And not only was there the darkness, but there was also light in the same place, unseparate. And so beginning is this area, this not area, because you can't, it's not a physical location. It's a consciousness, if you will, where nothing, it's beyond duality. You talked about, without seeing the duality, what is there? Beginning is beyond duality. It's what is, was, and will be, beyond this or that, beyond opposite. And so when you get beyond opposite, it's like going inside of your own self. There's darkness within each of us. And darkness is nothing negative. It's simply something that's not yet known or manifested. And so beginning is going back to that. We go through the recreation every time we trust enough to go into our consciousness, ourselves, our consciousness, to see the darker parts of who we are, the things that we may not be happy with. I may have an issue with greed. I may have an issue with jealousy. I may have an issue with something specific, and that has to be exposed in me. I have to be willing to expose that to light, so that it's more than darkness and light. It becomes one. It becomes part of who I am. But I understand that it is no longer a negative necessarily. I integrate that into me, and it becomes part of who I am. And knowing that I am one with a wound, I understand that I needed that part of me in order to be able to see, quote unquote, with my eye, that that's not all of me, that it's only a part of me. And I know I'm just I'm going down this rabbit hole. I feel like I am anyway, except that I know what I want to say. But we have to have those opposites in order to be able to see the difference between the two. But then we have to come to the understanding that the two are part of the whole of who I am. And it is only the light, knowing who I am as part of sacred unity, as part of a womb, I can set each in its rightful, quote unquote, place in me. Not a location, but a consciousness. And I can't balance it until I can see both. And the balance is understanding that the both are one.
So Nicodemus, see if I understand what you're saying. So Nicodemus is told to return to beginning. And in that return to beginning, there are no humans at all. There is absolutely nothing, yet it's everything. So this swirling light, darkness, if you take black paint and put it on a canvas, and you take white paint and put it in the same place where that black paint is, and you take a brush and begin to swirl it around, you have light and darkness in the same space, taking up the same space. That's the oneness of it all. And it is hovering over this chaos. What is that chaos? It's hovering over all of these thoughts and the extraction of those thoughts from the deep. The direction that they will carry you is predicated upon whether they are extracted, or how they're extracted, rather. If the thoughts are extracted because of a desire for understanding, then once the thought is extracted, it becomes a part of that dark wisdom. And once you understand it, it becomes a part of that light. However, if the thoughts are extracted and they are in that dark paint or that dark place, and you use that, you apply your own understanding to it, and you use it to manipulate, then you remain in that place of chaos because the wisdom has not been understood, and you begin to make application of your own selfish desires, and you call it the wisdom. You call it wisdom, and you use it in a selfish way, which means that you have not made the right application of it. Therefore, it is necessary for you to continuously return to beginning until you are able to be desirous enough for the benefit of humanity, for that wisdom to become the light of understanding to you. And then at that point, you begin to attract enlightened thoughts from that pool of chaos. Does that make sense? Or is that on the road to what you were saying, Barbara?
Yeah, the darkness is simply potential, unmanifested potential. That's all it is. But we've been taught that it's a negative, that it's a something that we should shun away from. But it's a part of who we are. Light and darkness is who we are. And when we have that understanding, and when we know that, it's like we can do recreation. The thing about creation and recreation is we usually see it as an external kind of thing. We create this, we create that. But we were formed and made to live the creation story in every way, because that's what we do when we go back and we take that opportunity to expose the potential in us. That's what that darkness is. We don't know it yet, but only when we go and have the courage and the faith to look at it can we see that it's part of who we are. And like we go through life situations, and we say to ourselves, where's the light in that? Where's the light in that? Well, when we go back and we search ourselves and we come face to face using that mirror, if you will, in a sense, and see the darkness, the unmanifested potential, the jealousy that I don't want to be jealous of anymore, the greed, I don't want to be greedy anymore, the selfishness, I don't want to be selfish anymore. I want to do things for the good of humanity. That's when we recreate. And for every time that we do that within ourselves, we go back to beginning. When we do that and we come through it, and we say, okay, that's what that is about. We expose that darkness for what it is. That's going back to the beginning, because the beginning, light and darkness were both there at the same time. It's difficult to put it in word containers.
So not just Barbara, to all you guys, if we follow this through, negative and positive are human inventions to determine something to be negative or bad or positive to be good. Those are human inventions. If it's spiritual, and for example, let's look at what? Let's look at racism or slavery. When we look at it through our human eyes and process it with our minds, it's extremely negative and reprehensible. Why is it extremely negative and reprehensible? Because we perceive it as being a negative to a group of people. However, if we look at that and see the potential in it, what is that potential? To force that group of people to seek an understanding of the source of this racism, of this desire to enslave. And as a result of seeking that, this group of people become enlightened to who we are, and at the same time began to see that this reprehensible institution has pushed you to a place where it forced you to reconcile with who you were created to be. Then is it a negative or is it a motivating force? So it's about, when we go to beginning, the question is, are we viewing this through the eyes and processing it through the mind of the human, or are we seeing it with the eye and processing it through the soul? And when we do that, process it through the soul, then everything that is perceived by the mind to be a negative is actually a catalyst that's designed to catapult us to a place of unicity with our Creator and bringing those along with us who have used the powers that we are endowed with to be manipulators and abusers. Does that make sense?
Pastor, I agree with everything you and Barbara said, and I'll go over and talk about my notes and kind of plug in because I say it a little different. I think I'm saying the same thing, but I use different terms and say it a little differently. The only difference that I have, and we can talk this out, I do not think it is possible for the human to return to the beginning. I think it is the soul of the spiritual man that returns to beginning. The human cannot. He does not have the ability. His vision has not been developed, and I'm talking spiritually. His eye has not been developed that he can see that far.
I can see that because when Jesus said to Nicodemus, you must return to beginning, right? He was speaking to him because he said, you don't know where the wind comes from, you don't know where it goes. So he's speaking to him about the spiritual eye being able to see beginning as opposed to his religious concepts.
And to show you we're on the same page, what I was speaking to is if you are not able to come out of your religious concepts, or you look at this and you do not see the more. You do not see, as Barbara said, I see it, but I can't explain it. I can't put the word. You don't see it. She could see it, but she can't pull it out of the nothingness. She can't put it out of the wisdom. The difference is when you see it from the human perspective, for lack of a better term, you only see your physical self and you become a corpse. You are not a corpse until you become a corpse. You become a corpse by not wanting to advance, not wanting to go to the deeper. And I'll show you in a minute why I call this deeper, different levels. You become a corpse by settling for what is not there, by seeing religious concepts and staying in that place and teaching and relying on that. And what ends up happening is there is no advancement, and you rely totally on what is physical, and It is what has created this physical world that we call, and this earth that we call, because in the beginning it was not that way at all.
So, Ron, may I ask you a question? So, are you saying that our concept of what is negative and what is positive, and I mean, good or bad, right?
Yes.
Our concept of that emanates from our religious concepts.
Yes. Most definitely.
If I can, I wanted to. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm just wanting to talk that out, but go ahead. You might give me a thought.
So yeah, that's what I'm trying to. What I was thinking about in terms of the darkness that Barbara was just talking about. We all been talking about recently. The darkness is the equivalent of unknown, and it doesn't mean it is bad, but is unknown, is yet to be discovered in a sense. Religion, or at least how religion has served us in a way, is to tell us who we were. And in doing so, we held on to the supposed light or limited light from religion and stayed there. And also with that telling us what our identity was, held on to that in terms of as we talk about our religious beliefs, and would not let it go. And what I mean by that is we identified this religion, you going to church, this is what it told, it has told me who I am. To actually let go and do what Jesus was telling Nicodemus to do was for him to let go of his identity, which is then at first to become lost. And that is where the darkness comes in at, because he is discovering something that he knows nothing of, or at least at that moment, or at least his awareness of. And so it is required for him to be willing to dispense with those religious beliefs, or what it was that he was told to be from without, because the darkness is actually always within, and it's something that we must experience and go into ourselves. Something else I wanted to say, but kind of got a little sidetracked. But I just wanted to, I guess, add that part to the conversation in terms of the religion and the identity, and having to actually willing be lost. When all of us started this journey and we wanted to dig deeper, that meant that we had to be willing to not know for terms, and we were also admitting that we didn't know. And in that meant that we was like, okay, I'm not holding on to what I was taught in church. I want to go further. I want to discover. For some reason, it makes me think of like Alice in Wonderland. There's all these things you couldn't necessarily imagine, but you're discovering. So you have to do away with old thoughts, which is required. And like I said, it just means initially being lost. You can't discover something new without first admitting that or accepting that you don't know everything about something. Finish for the moment.
Okay. I see.
Ron, can I just respond?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry.
And I have a question, Ron.
Can I just make a response to what Sheldon just said?
Okay.
Part of the loss, part of the perceived lostness is that we make a determined effort not to box in or put a boundary around what it is we want to see. I mean, we are so used to doing that as physical beings, of describing things the way we want them to be. But part of the quote unquote seeming lostness is making a specific effort, a conscious decision not to try to describe what it is when we search that inner darkness, not to describe how it should be, but to let it be and let it unfold and let the light which shines on it expose what it is, rather than us trying to expose it with our mind. Because when we do that, we don't really expose it. It just comes out defined as something we want it to be from a physical perspective. But the spiritual part of it is trusting that I don't have to understand or be able to draw, quote unquote, draw a picture of what it should look like. It's like when we were talking about what happened with the virus. We don't know how it will unfold. We just trust that it will work out for the good of all humanity, and just let it, the light as it exposes it, manifest that that potential of what's occurred in the hearts and the consciousness of mankind as they go through this physical kind of thing, which they then begin to understand was really more than physical. It was spiritual.
And before you get to Audra's question, I guess that very thing that you just mentioned, the idea of trying to shape or hold on to the identity, is the very thing that keeps one from going or making it to beginning. I'm finished.
Okay.
If I could share, this morning I was listening to NPR, and this lady was sharing her experience about the transitioning of her father. And she shared that she was on her patio and this owl came out of nowhere and just kind of looked, stared her in the eye. And she said in that moment she was just transfixed. And it happened again. And the owl allowed her to, not touch or anything, and she wasn't fearful. But there was clearly a connection. And then after that second experience with the owl, her father transitioned. And she went on to share how something about that experience with the owl, and she could not explain it or put it into any words, but somehow it helped her deal with and walk through her father's transition. And she used those words, the words transitioned. And she, in her final words, she said that she wasn't religious, but she knew that her father was still here, not in the physical form. She couldn't really explain it. She didn't know where he but it intrigued her enough to want or have a desire to really understand that better. But she did know that he just transitioned to a different state or being, and like I said, she said she could not put it into words, but she was just going to leave it at that and understood this was much bigger than her father dying or transitioning. And she had one other experience with the owl. This time it wasn't at her property, it was somewhere a distance off, and she had to go to that place. And then the owl flew away, and she knew that she was going to be okay. She was going to, this whole situation was going to reveal, more at it, but she knew it had something to do with her father. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for definitely thank you for sharing. What it made me think as it relates to even what we're talking about is going through that process. Uh, it changed her in a way that she no longer thought of herself as just being human in terms of the experience. So she saw herself more. She related with her father and saw how her father was here, but in some type of way that she didn't describe, which of course also means that the same thing applies to her as well. So not only did she begin to see, but she also began to understand and have and begin to have an experience of being part of something that just goes beyond, excuse me, just being a human being. And so using that as an example of what we've been talking about, she had to, in a way, for lack of better words, interact with that experience with the owl, which she could have just simply ignored um, and allowed that to take place, something that before she might have just completely dismissed, and then it would not have been part of her experience. And these types of things present themselves to us in our experience all the time. But our experience is more so shaped upon what we recognize and what we choose to interact with, which is also based upon mostly about how we see it and think of ourselves.
But in a sense, that's a very good example of someone who went back to beginning, because
Yes,
and
that's what I
even
was
though
going
she
to say.
might not have consciously understood that,
Yes.
she went back to beginning, because then the duality of life and death changed for her. Those two things that we say, life is living and death is that you're done. It changed and transformed into something else for her. And that's what I mean by, she gave a good example of a physical kind of thing interspersed with the owl, which has the which represents wisdom in a sense too. That it totally transformed her perception or her beliefs or what she thought were life and death into a different kind of existence.
I was thinking death transformed into transition for her.
Okay, I'm going to jump in because all of that kind of gets back to my question. But when I know the scriptures tell us somewhere in Amos and again somewhere in John that nothing happens unless it's revealed to you in some form or fashion. So yes, we have to look for the signs, and she was willing to pay attention in that regard with the owl. Yes, and it took her back to a place of beginning because it was profound for her. But getting back to my question, and Pastor talking about the colors, the black and white swirling on the canvas. My question was, did Nicodemus get what he came for from Jesus? And the reason I ask that is because I think he did, in terms of he began to realize that there was something there, something more, and he began to ask questions. The questions made him think more about what is really true and what is truth, so that even though we don't have a picture of him leaving Jesus and going off to do whatever, I think in essence, he did get back to beginning, because he began to question what's really what. And he began to question Am I really who I think I am? So I think in that way, he did get back to beginning. And because of the colors swirling on the canvas, you can get little pieces of it. But it's up to you whether you continue to look for those little pieces, or you choose to stay in a system that tells you who you are or what you're supposed to think or do or feel or be. So I think he did get back to beginning. He just didn't realize it right there with talking with Jesus. But I think if he continued to be the kind of person who would question and think and want to find the truth, then that was his beginning journey to, that was his journey to beginning, if you see what I mean.
Audrey, I think we see that he did because of his actions. I'm trying to remember somewhere in there he protests and has a discussion with the Pharisees when they are plotting against Jesus, and he is the one who fights not to do what they were about to do. We further sees that he was a part of whoever it was that prepared his burial, who prepared Jesus' body for burial. So I guess in this way, the scriptures gives us a little glimpse of what he turned out to be after this encounter. And so I would say, I'm like you, I think he did because of the depth of the conversation and those two things that I just mentioned to you. And if anybody else has any further enlightenment on that.
I have a question. So it's not a comment but a question. So do we go back to beginning, or we go to beginning? Is there it just seems like it's not flowing with me. Maybe I'm misunderstanding to go back to beginning, or do we go to beginning?
Evelyn, the reason we go back to beginning is because everything came from beginning. It's for us to go to beginning is to assume that we've never been there before, and that way we're making an effort to return to go to beginning rather with our humanness as opposed to with our spiritual desires, knowing that that's where we emanated from. Our origin is in beginning, so that it is always a return. The other part of that is this: if we don't look at it as a return, then we're also looking at it individualistically. That each individual goes to beginning. However, if we return to beginning, then we are more apt to embrace the reality that we are one yet many. That you are me and I am you. The difference is how we embrace this beginning. I do believe that we are where we are because we returned to beginning without even knowing it, and this is what I mean by that. I remember saying, in particular to Mount Calvary Great New Faith, that I was going to begin entertaining questions during what we call Sunday morning service. And Great New Faith embraced it, but Mount Calvary did not. Subsequently, I left Mount Calvary. And one of the things I said to Great New Faith, but of course not understanding anything like what we see now, is that when you see God, it won't look like what you think it is, or something of that nature. And we talked about becoming the first century church. What happened? We were at beginning at that point, and we began to understand, to seek to understand what the message was in the scriptures. So when we began to understand the message in the scriptures, what we began to see was not just Great New Faith and Foundation and the Monday Night Class and all the people who are connected. What we started seeing was the truth, the light that was in the scriptures. It is at that point that we are at beginning. We return to the place of the light. And when as we saw the enlightenment, this vision of beginning started to expand. And I do believe that one of the reasons it is so difficult for us to put into words this thing of beginning is because it's extremely difficult to see the forest when you're too close to the trees. You have to see it from a distance, then you can see the entire forest. What we are seeing now are the slithers of light that we are being shown at this place of beginning. So in essence, I guess to respond directly or more specifically, Evelyn, to your question is, it is always a return because our existence is not based upon our exiting the womb of a parent. Our existence is based upon life being brought into existence at the point of beginning. Does that make sense to you, Evelyn?
It does. So can I say then I can experience the beginning?
Yes.
Because still the going back does not resonate with me yet, but I'm quite sure in time it will. But I just see it more as experiencing the beginning instead of going back to beginning.
Evelyn, you have actually experienced returning to the beginning, and I can give you an example of how all of us have. When we are on here and you would say that something really resonates, and it sounds like for the first time, that it might have been the first time that you actually thought about it, considered it with your mind. However, in your soul, it seems so familiar and comforting that it feels a part of you. And so all of a sudden you've discovered this thing deep down that was always there. And you can't even necessarily explain it or put it in words, but it's just comforting, like, I really, really, really feel that. That is the experience that we're talking about of returning to the beginning.
Okay. Thank you.
I like to back up a little bit and look at darkness again. I see that from a slightly different perspective. And even beginning, and that's why I want to talk this out. I see it slightly different. I looked at it from the perspective of John first, in the light, in his life as the light of men. As I was saying, that light is that energy that, you know, captures all of nature and the whole universe. And the word that is used is nephesh, napshah in the Aramaic. And what it is talking about is breath or spirit. So when you look at it from that perspective, it goes on to talk about the different aspects of the soul, the different layers of the soul. And, you know, when I look at that and start understanding it, understanding to me becomes real. It is awakened based on your desires. And it doesn't mean that everything comes to you right away. What Nephesh says is the different aspects of the soul, and the same as in Genesis where they're talking about darkness covered the surface of the deep. The deep, I'm using the word levels because I'm saying there are other aspects to it. So just as we're talking, if you we may have had this lesson 10 years ago, and you saw what you needed 10 years ago, and you look at this now, the soul holds on to that because that was the truth, that was the enlightenment that you needed then. So the light that comes out of the darkness, once you make up your mind that I do not wish to be religious, I see truth, I see something in it, as I've heard us say numbers of times, I can see the more, then the darkness is no longer confusion. The darkness is what you see at the other end of the darkness. You see that there is understanding, but I have to get to it. How many times have we bought books and held on to the books because you pick that book up and you read it and you don't understand the first page, but you put it down, you don't get frustrated by it because you know at the right time, at the right space where I am, I will see this. So just like now, these lessons are not the first time we've gone over them, but we made up our mind that this is where I want to be. I am going to pursue truth. And as we do that, we create more and more layers of the nephesh, the spirit, and we build upon it, and enlightenment upon enlightenment upon enlightenment until you can see clear. And what you're getting to the center of self. You get to the I am, which means you learn to create space for truth. You learn to move out of the way and push all those preconceived notions out of the way. You become one with wisdom. And you always know that when you become one with wisdom, that you see these things, that you have awakened understanding. And understanding comes to you as it is needed. And what do I mean by it is needed? We talk about the higher self of the soul self and of the knowing and the unknowing. Which one is in charge at any given time? The knowing self or the unknowing self? Which one, which part of you, how much compassion do you have for mankind? How much love or how much of a desire do you need to know this or want to know this? So all of those are what influences the amount of enlightenment that we get. So when you're in a state of religion, when you are in a state of I'm still trying to find my balance, and because finding your balance doesn't mean that you're totally there where you need to be. Finding your balance is making a decision. I don't care what it takes. I want to see enlightenment. I want to know who I am. That's the beginning of your balance. So once you make that decision, or before you make that decision, this wisdom, this darkness is confusion. You don't know what to do with it, and it frustrates you. But once you make that decision that this is who I am and this is the journey that I'm taking, from that point on, you're in touch with creating space for more. And the soul part of you creates depth. So when it talks about the surface of the deep, the deeper you get into that, the less human you are. The more of the transition that is taking place, the more soulful you are becoming, the more you're giving up. Because and I'm going back up to Nicodemus. If you are not willing to go deeper, if you are not willing to trust your nephesh, your soul, your spirit, and go deeper into figuring out or seeing these things, then you're living as a corpse. Because you're depending on what is physical. You're depending on your body. You're depending on my birthday is in May, and that is my beginning. That is not your beginning. You're totally forgetting the spiritual aspect of who you are, and that is the treasure chest that holds everything that shows you that you are the universe. So how I look at this, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, I am two spheres. I don't mean spheres as something sharp. I mean two globes. I am two containers. And in one container, I am limitless. I'm all-knowing. And in the other container is the one that contains my humanity and all of humanity. And that is what's being shaped. That is what's being filled. That is what's being influenced. So is it being influenced by religion, which makes it a dead spirit and it contains no life, or are we infusing into it life and light? So that's what the beginning that I see is me being filled. I am these two globes. I am these two containers. And I am one with the Creator, helping to create me, helping to fill me, helping to show that I am willing to move past the darkness, that does not scare me, because that is where life is. That is where my true essence lies. So that's kind of, in a way, I kind of said the same thing that we talked about, but I just kind of see it in pictures in my own head.
Can I expand on that, Ron?
Yes, sir.
I want you, in keeping with what you said, let me see if this idea of returning to beginning can be seen by giving a physical example. You know, Jesus taught by parables that people were using things that people were familiar with. Let me make an effort at this point to do that. When we were taught history, and our history told us that we were enslaved, and we saw ourselves as being people who were once enslaved. And that is as far as our history went. We had allowed others to tell us who we are. In church, we were told that we are Baptists, we are Methodists, and we believe these things, and that's what makes us Christians, because of the Baptist or Methodist doctrine, etc. That's as far back as it went. No different than our history going back to enslavement, and that's the end of it. However, one day there was something inside of us that said there's got to be more to this than enslavement. And we began a journey, a search. And we began to see that our origin was not in an enslaved cabin somewhere on a plantation, but our existence, our essence started in a faraway land called Africa. And all of a sudden, there was new light opened up to us. And as opposed to seeing ourselves as enslaved pickers of cotton, we began to see ourselves as prince and princess, as king and queens, as people with the in-depth understanding of not only nature itself in terms of the earth, but the universe as well. And that expanded us. Did we understand all of who we are then? No, we didn't. However, it started a journey to understand that we are more than slaves. That is the same thing it is with this. Our beginning was not in a slave ship or on a plantation. Our beginning was deeper than that. And even though we don't understand all of it, we understand enough of it to come to a realization that we are more than slaves. The more than slaves is pictured in what we are able to bring to the table in this earth realm. The more than a Baptist or a Methodist is beginning to take shape for us, and we're beginning to see that we are more than a Sunday school teacher or deacon or a preacher. We are more than that. We are the true essence of what it means to bring heaven and earth together. We are more than a Sunday school teacher. We are the teacher teachers of the universe, and how it functions, and how humanity is intricately tied to the universe and its origin. So the beginnings of the slave is deeper than the slave ship, and the beginnings of who we are is deeper than the church. Does that make sense, or does that help you picture it any clearer? And I do solicit response to this question.
I think it's an excellent example. Yeah. And to me, it further gives a picture, shows a picture of where we are now, as far as being able to see further. The seeing the further is sort of as you mentioned, seeing Africa and connecting with that gives you hope and leads you in a different direction, or continues your journey or your search in the direction that you're in. But puts you. The main thing is it puts you at a higher mindset, because now you're searching and you see with a different and a better expectation. You know that there's something there at the end when you get there, or the next thing that you see. And that makes all the difference in the world. It increases your desire.
That's even a little more profound example of a returning to beginning, because we as Africans, before we were enslaved, were a very spiritual people who knew the Creator through our experience, through the land, through the nature, through those types of things. We had a very intimate relationship with the Creator. And after we were enslaved, we forgot all that. Or we were told things that made us forget that. But once we rediscover it, it is a returning to beginning also.
Thanks. Is that? Go ahead.
This is Barbara. I have something that I found that relates to the mirror kind of concept that you use. It's from a Sufi poet. David asked God, "We know you don't need either this world or the one beyond, so what was the wisdom in creating them?" God replied, "Humanity is enmeshed in time. How shall I answer so you can understand?" God continues, "I was a hidden treasure, abundant, radiating love. To reveal this treasure, I created a mirror. Its face, the heart of being. Its back, the worlds of phenomena. Its face, meaning it is truly who you are, and its back, representing the world of things. The back seems better than the face, if that's the only side you know. And what we're talking about is the back, for so many of us, has been better than the actual face, the knowingness of who we are, because that was all we knew. But as we, to use Ron's words, as we begin to uncover the nefesh, the different levels, we begin to see the face much more than the back of who we are, the back of the mirror. It's almost like we were talking about things we read 10 years ago, and we thought we had come to a logical conclusion of what it, understanding of it. But the fruit, the ripeness of the fruit is ripe for its time. But just because the fruit was ripe then, this is a different time and a different space in terms of our consciousness. And if we hold on to that fruit that we had years ago, without accepting the a different ripeness of fruit. That old fruit, which was ripe for its time, is now spoiled. You know how fruit can get overripe and die off the vine or not be good for anything. It was ripe for its time. And so as we begin, that's what I see when you talk about the nefesh and the different levels. As we grow more spiritually, the fruit is ripe for that particular time. And so as we grow even more, what's ripe for today will not be ripe for what's revealed to us as who we are in perhaps another moment or another time, if that resonates.
It does indeed, and to show you how to be, how important it is for mankind to be enlightened. That it doesn't throw those things away. The Tree of Life calls them the DAAT, and I may be pronouncing it wrong. In other words, your experiences are saved so that you can go back and look at those. I may be talking to my nephew about something that I need to dip back into that to show him something and then walk him forward. So all those experiences are saved, and we look at them and you learn to cherish them because it talks about the history of man. It walks you forward through the history of man and show you who you are and where you come from. And it gives you more of an opportunity to create more space. That's the holiness. We want to say we separated from this. No, the holiness is creating space so that God can feel it, that you can grow into something more, so you can experience something else. You become one with Hakma. You become one with wisdom. And of course, it is darkness because you don't understand it. But it does not become confusion until you turn away from it and start being selfish or being impatient or being religious. But once you turn to truth and you say, this is the direction I'm going, no matter what, whatever it takes, then that darkness, if all it's asking you to do is be patient, and it will reveal itself as needed.
And Ron, that is no different than when we begin to understand who we are historically, right? It takes time to understand the context of it and how to put it in the right context. What do I mean by that? Argue made a statement earlier in reference to that about the spiritual nature of our being prior to the enslavement. Well, when we start looking at that historically, we have to look at it through eyes that are clear. Because if we look at it through religious eyes, then we see those connections to spirituality as being something that's demonic, because that's what we've been taught through religion. However, when we look at it in reality, we see that it is a true connection, a true unicity with our Creator. It is a oneness with the universe that we were experiencing, as opposed to being, as we were taught, heathens seeking, heathens who were engaged rather in a religion that is bound to carry you to hell. I'm done. I hope that helps.
I got a question. Does going back to the beginning, is that the same as dying to self? Is it on a daily basis that we go back to the beginning? I may have missed it. I'm not sure. Are the two related?
This is Barbara. I believe that is a form of beginning, one level of returning. Dying to self, I choose to give up those things in me, those selfish things in me that are not for the benefit of me. But the bigger picture is giving up those things that in me so that I can benefit mankind. I mean, it's a growth process. The first step and the first uncovering the first level is giving up those selfish things in me. Consciously, once we know it, giving it up, choosing to not be there, to not dwell there. And then the bigger portion of that is just like we said last couple of times ago, when we have these burdens of mankind on our seeming to be a weight on our shoulders, that's the bigger part of and the deeper part of the nefesh that we are now. That is not just about me; it's about the burdens of mankind, and that's what the Christ felt, the burdens of mankind on his shoulders. That's what we feel now, and so it begins with dying to self daily, dying to selfishness, dying to what's all about me on a daily basis.
Thank you.
And they even look at that further. We talk about daily. Daily is every time you get some enlightenment. Daily is every time it needs to be. Daily is every time it comes up in your spirit, in your thought. Is this something I'm wrestling with? So you may die to yourself in a 24-hour period, at several moments of the day. When it becomes, because what you're saying is this has become spiritual in me. I'm becoming a spiritual being. So this is a continuous thing.
And thank you, Ron. And the other thing is that when you're dying to self implies rebirth. So whatever that thing is, it bursts something new in you that I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm different now. So it implies rebirth.
So if I will, the wind blows, I'm back in John. I just want to kind of tie something up. And doesn't mean the discussion has to end where we are, but I just want to kind of bring this back since it was a question that I asked. Verse 8 says, the wind blows here. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but do not know where it comes from or where it is going. And so everyone who is born again, born of the Spirit. In other words, and please, guys, speak to this if you see something more, something different. If you want to remain religious, Nicodemus, if you want to remain a part of your leadership, that you are satisfied being a ruler, you are satisfied with the status and the amount of money or attention that it brings you, then you are becoming a corpse. You are a corpse. You have no life. And not having life, you are not free. Your soul is not free. You have not reached that point of enlightenment in self. You do not have the desires to see deeper within yourself. And in doing so, you have all types of restrictions. You're restricted mentally. You're restricted physically because you've incorporated yourself in this skin, and it has bound you up, and you have no desire to be anything more. You're definitely not free spiritually because you have limited amount of thinking, and you can't get out of your own head. And even the words you see on the book are just words. You're not able to bring life to them because you can't. Your depth of perception is not spiritual. You can't see any further. But if you choose to be spiritual, if you desire to understand who you are, if you desire to see your soulful self, your the part of you that is experiencing that brought you here, to say that there is more, that is challenging the thing that's in you that is causing this confusion, then this can set you free. You can be boundless. Your mind, your soul, your spirit, every part of you can be boundless. And this is the beginning of your transformation. And this heaven and earth that was created is showing you that this is limitless. And you only have the earth there because you are, or gives you opportunity to pause. You can take something and pause. What does this mean? What does that mean? Where am I? Where am I? Let me exhale. Let me look at this further. But that pool of enlightenment never stops giving as long as you are willing to breathe, to take a breath, to inhale, and to see the more, and willing to give up your humanity. So this kind of spoke to me. I'm still not clear if we have maybe something we need to sleep on or make sure we got this. But if somebody else sees more in this, please help me out with it.
I do.
Okay.
And what you were saying to to add to that, if you desire to be spiritual, what do? When he talks about beginning, right? It says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was Elohim. So what he's saying, understand what's being said. Do not see it as being a light, as the sun gives light. That's not what this light in Genesis is about. It's not about the darkness as the absence of light would imply. It is about things that you don't understand. However, if you have a desire to understand it, if your desire to understand it is for the right reasons, it is at that point that you will begin to understand the words that are on the page that you have been reading for all these years, and they were just words. And the moment that you begin to understand them, they become life, not just to you, but they become life for everyone that you are connected to, and they become life for humanity itself. That's what I also see in that when Jesus is talking to him. I'm done. Oh, and that's what's happening with us. We are endeavoring to understand what's on the page, not reading them as a cliche or bumper sticker or quoting scripture. No, but reading them, understanding them based upon the context given to them at the time that they were spoken, at the time that they were written, within the cultural understandings of the people to whom these words were spoken. Now I think I'm finished.
Okay. Thank you. And emphasis on you become not just for you, but you become the light of men. You become, and that's my way of saying it, you become enlightenment for mankind. This is being, as we have put this together, this is not just an individual kind of thing. This affects not only those in the earth, but those from past and future. This brings everything in creation right here, right now. Any questions about that?
Ron, I have a question. Does everybody kind of understand that this creation process is not just a one-time thing, that it continually unfolds not only in the cosmos, but within us as part of the cosmos?
That's good,
Bob.
Bob.
Back to this going to the beginning thing. That's part of what creation is.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you were saying about dying to self. You're giving a new opportunity to birth something new every time. It's not a one-time thing.
Well, every time we embrace an enlightened principle that we see, that in itself is creation, isn't it? So it's a continuous.
Yeah.
I am sort of curious though, and nobody's feelings is hurt if somebody say I didn't get that or I don't see it. I think this is extremely important, and let's make sure that it is clear. Any aspect of this that someone may have question on, if hopefully one of us can answer it or bring clarity to it. But I want to make sure we're getting this.
Hi, this is Mary. I love the discussion, and so many times that I've heard this scripture preached and taught, so to speak, but it never made sense. I'm thinking, I don't get it. So what I'm getting, and you help me if I'm off base, is the fact that when we embrace, for instance, searching, seeking truth, and when a truth is revealed and it resonates with us, we're going back to the beginning, recognizing who we are and that we're all connected, we're part of the cosmos, and that if we just pay more attention to, we acknowledge that we want to continue to grow and want to learn. And the key is opening our minds and not just be closed and saying, okay, I got it, this is it, but continue to look for growth. Pay attention to the small things. I remember I saw someone the other day, and before I would think about their color or their size and stuff, and then I saw, oh, this is God. That's God walking. So I'm seeing it differently. So I just thank you for that, and I think I'm on the right path. Just paying attention, like the woman paid attention to the owl. She saw that. Had she not paid attention, she would have missed that moment. So there are moments that we get and we see glimpses and we kind of ignore it. But I need to stay focused, stay more attention, and be aware of what's going on. Just, what do you think?
Thank you,
How
Mary.
sweet it is.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you for that. Yeah. And I love the example with the owl. I mean, she saw it for what it was. She saw the spirituality of it right away. And that allowed life to come to it and open her eyes and to see the Creator in a whole different way. Had she been closed, she would have missed that. I'm sorry, Pastor, somebody's about to say something.
When she said she was not religious, that's why she saw it. If she
Yes.
religious would have allowed her to see that.
Yes.
This is Amir Bashir. I'd like to offer that the process of enlightenment begins from the cradle and ends at the grave, that we have this process going on as it was in the beginning, and the evening and the morning were the first day. It comes out of darkness into the light. We come from a dark womb into the light of this world. It is a process, and it's an adventure that is very exciting because we're always learning, and you will continue to learn until the day you leave this world. Thank you.
Thank you. You reminded me of something, something we said at the beginning, but and something I think Barbara said tonight or today rather. Guys, let's embrace our darkness. Let's embrace our unknowing. It is not a bad thing. It is not a bad thing, and until we stop, until we decide there is no more for us. But there's always more. You are infinite. You're boundless. And here is something to hold on to. Here is something that I love about this discussion. You are the only one that can do this. You are the Son of Man. You are the human. You are the connection between what is known and what is unknown. You are the connection between what is dark and what is light. You are the one that brings it into the earth. You are the only one that can be born again or return to beginning. You. How awesome is that? That this was written for us for this moment. That's awesome to me. And that's why I don't want to miss it.
Ron, the idea of the infinity of it all, how long have we been teaching and have never taught the same lesson or the same thing the same way? Why? Because every single time that we teach, we are shown something there that was not seen before.
Yes.
It is impossible to exhaust enlightenment.
I'll tell you how awesome that is, or give an example of it. There have been times when I used to journey to Columbia on a regular basis. We can talk the same scripture on Saturday and do it on Sunday, and it comes out a different way with the same teacher. Whether a pastor was doing it or someone else, it would come out a different way. I mean, you get a lot of the same information, but the discussions would be different. There'd be different points of emphasis in one place than it would be the other. But it was all truth.
I am just flowing to these scriptures that kind of reinforce what you're saying. This talks about sacred spaciousness. The universe creates newness and diversity by creating possibility itself. So in this tradition, the power of hearing and the power of the word are created. And by them, one can hear or speak something into existence. And that's why things can change from what you call, when we say daily, from one moment to the next. Because that's the nature of expansiveness of creation.
If I can, I'm going to ask everybody to do something. And it's a simple thing, kind of. I want us to meditate on this because I want us to make sure that we have if not talking example, a visual of what returning to beginning looks like. And it may be something, as I think Pastor said earlier, that we have to experience more so than be able to put into words. But this is important, and we don't necessarily have to discuss it unless it's something somebody wants to talk about. But let's see what that looks like to us, because each one of us has had different experiences, but at the same time, it's one truth that is trying to speak to us, and I think it's extremely important, especially if you look at the chaotic state that the world is in. Because as I start off saying, I believe that this John 3 and 8. John 5, 1 through 17, where it talks about the pool, and Genesis 1 and 2, I think they're all coming from the same place. I think all of those things are related. I think the lameness and the crippleness and stuff that are sitting there, I think is talking about agitation that man has put himself in, that religion has put himself in, that sin has put us in. And you wait there for an angel, you wait for the word of God to come and set you free. And Jesus is showing that you don't have to do this every season. You can do this whenever you desire to. You become the enlightenment. You search in the depths of who you are. You look inside of yourself and capture what is there, but based on your experiences of where you are and what your desires are, and you set yourself free. You set mankind free, because when you set yourself free, I'm looking at, or I'm addressing the lameness and the crippleness and the blindness that is in the eyes of my brother. That's the within and the without. So I think all those things are related. As we transition from, as we as the Son of Man transition from our humanity, so does mankind. And it may not always be as visual as we think, as we discussed yesterday. We may look at it and say, I see this hasn't changed, that hasn't changed. But open your eye carefully. Open your eye, not your eyes, and see what's happening around you. You might be the measurement, not the stuff that's happening around you. It may be you that's the measurement of change. Questions or comments, y'all? Well, that's all I have. If no one else has anything to add.
Then we'll pick up tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Beautiful discussion. And again, if there are any questions or comments, feel free to send them through a text or pastor, one of the teachers, and we'll be happy to talk about it, talk it out. Okay? Thanks again. I hope you enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Have a good day, everybody.